All right, and welcome to Fast Break Breakfast NBA Podcast. My name is Keith Parrish, and I'm here once again with my buddy through the miracle of computer phone. Here with Dave DeFore. Dave, happy Labor Day. How's it going?
I do like that we're working on Labor Day.
Yeah, this isn't work. This is joy.
Yeah.
No, we should have taken the day off in solidarity with the workers of the world.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Can I just say something?
Taking the day off, Dave,
in solidarity with the people who can't take days off is that solidarity? Isn't solidarity going to work when you can take the days off? Now, I mean,
we're sticking it to the bosses, right? We want
that's it.
The ledgers to go down. Listen, we're self-employed of the Fast Break Breakfast empire. There's no man taking their cut of this.
There's no boss.
There's no boss. I'm the boss. And I made you work on Labor Day.
You did. Wow.
Sorry about that. I didn't want to infringe on your holiday weekend plans, and you scoffed as if you had holiday weekend plans. How is this Monday any different than a normal Monday for you, Dave?
It's not. I'm going to go to the gym right after this. I walked my dog this morning. I don't do stuff on holidays. Like, I'm not like I will go home for Thanksgiving, but I try to get there before Thanksgiving and I try to leave after. I don't really enjoy like airport travel.
Oh, it's miserable on the holidays. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I try not to exasperate that by traveling like on dumb.
So this is the idea for you. A holiday is amateur hour for hanging out.
Yes.
You're like, I don't need to don't tell me I have to have a cookout on Monday, first Monday of September. I'm going to have a cookout whenever I want. That's how I live my life.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Friday night, going out on a Friday night, that's amateur hour. I go out on Tuesdays.
I feel like this is the thing about not having kids, right? Like the holidays don't dictate my life nearly as much because it's not like I've got school to consider for my kid. My dog doesn't care that it's Labor Day.
Yeah.
So it's pretty nice.
I, of course, have children, and they're not in school today, but it's fine. They're pretty easy to have around the house. But we also don't maybe always observe the holidays. Like our Disney World trip we took a week and a half ago, that was no fall break. Going to Disney World on fall break, that's amateur hour. We go during the school year. Pull our kids out of school.
Well, it's an education, right?
We get these. Yeah, sure. They learned about the world countries at Epcot or something. No, we got all these alerts days, like you have an unexcused absence today. It's like, I know.
Hey, let me ask you though.
Yeah.
If you are, this is all right. So again, now we're going to get into some societal stuff here. If I choose,
the fans love the societal stuff at the top of these shows.
But if I choose to take my kid out of school, that's an excuse.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's my kid.
If you're I mean, I almost used
truancy laws.
I almost used the term slippery slope. And I say many times that if you use the term slippery slope in an argument, you've lost the argument.
Yeah.
But like there's a fine line. I understand if you're actively parenting your kids and doing stuff.
Right.
That's amazing. They're not missing out on things at school. If your kid is at a risk of like not passing their grade, maybe.
If they're skipping school, it's a difference than their parents.
Or if you're like, listen, I have elected as a parent of my child to let my kids stay at home as opposed to go to school. That's where it maybe gets tricky. I don't know.
Work from home is it's here to stay. Why not? What if there were kids who were like, hey, this whole commuting thing is not for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stick to Zoom classes if I could.
They offer virtual learning. There are all kinds of school options now. And there are different paths you can take as opposed to the requirements. I mean, we got a big truancy letter back in the day. Very much so post-COVID.
Yeah.
When like we were more strict with our children with our like isolation policies, because like our kid was sick and they're like, oh yeah, the kid can come back like 2 days after COVID. You're like, that's just irresponsible. Like my wife's like, our kids are still contagious. Like we're not sending them back into school. And so we had like a big thing where they're like, you've had 14 unexcused. Like they were excused. We told you every time, like our kid has COVID. we're not coming into school. It's weird. It was fine. Anyways, we've now covered.
You got to come up with a different thing. You just got to say, oh yeah, bed bugs. Something that would be scary to them.
Apparently, lice is no longer a reason to keep your kids out of school.
I saw that, and that is insane. But it did divert a flight recently.
Oh, man.
Yeah. All right.
Dave, we're doing part 2 of our Butter or Parkay previews. This is part of an 11-episode thread previewing the upcoming season. I'm just making that up. But we are looking today at the Southwest Division. Last episode, we did the Atlantic Division. We just randomly picked. We're going to bounce around. We're not doing this in alphabetical or East.
I didn't want to go to all the East.
Yeah. So today we're going to do the Southwest Division. We're going to look at the offseason moves. We're going to determine whether or not we think those teams got better or worse. And in the parlance of our show, that is Butter or Parkay. Before we get to all of that stuff, though, let's talk about some breakfasts. Dave, have you had breakfast on?
Yeah, just
this important holiday.
A little cold brew and protein. You know what's funny though is that I actually went out to breakfast the past 2 days. I don't typically do that, but
what'd you have at we're talking a sit down restaurant?
Okay, sit down restaurant. Yeah. I did like standard bacon and eggs with some rosemary sourdough toast on Saturday.
Yeah.
The potatoes, my dog was super into potatoes. So
nice.
He was very excited for that. And then yesterday I did shrimp and grits, a nice fruit bowl, and my dog ate a waffle.
That sounds like some tremendous
pretty good breakfast
living. I'm very, very jealous of that. I haven't had
although the shrimp and grits were a little runny.
Yeah.
And this place normally nails them.
I don't. So. That is the one thing. I don't love grits. They're a Southern dish, and despite being from the South, I don't love it. But especially when you get a runny version, it's like, oh, this is not right. Okay.
It was almost like it was just melted butter with some stuff.
My breakfast today had some donuts, as is the tradition on days.
Even on a non-school day?
We bantered back and forth about it. And we're like, why not? I also saw something on social media that was like a Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, like a pumpkin spice iced coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, same amount of sugar as 17 donuts. And I'm like, whoa. So it's not a big deal if I eat one donut.
Right.
So we thought about it this morning. We're like, man, my takeaway was, you know what? Let's let each kid have one donut again for the 3rd day in a row. We have at least hit the point of the pretty upscale local donut spot that was overrun by tourists. So, it's Labor Day weekend. A lot of Virginia Tech Hokies were in line on Saturday. They were in town to see their team lose to Vanderbilt. Not great, college football fans. But I've hit the point, at least now, that both my wife and I are just recognized. We walk in, they hand us our thing. Even when, there's a big line. And they're like, oh, here it is. So we have hit that level of donut patronage. But beyond that, I actually then had an early lunch. I'm calling that breakfast too. It was some leftover, this spicy anchovy pasta that my wife makes on a lot of Sunday nights. It's like a tomato sauce with anchovies, and it has a good bit of heat. It's so amazing. And then leftovers, it's so good.
Angel hair.
We have done, this was a straight spaghetti. And this is where I know I'm not a total foodie, because like, there was a couple times where my wife made her own pasta, which is a very intensive thing. And my wife's an unbelievable cook. And it was great. But then she's like, that's too much work. Let's just buy some fancier pasta. And she's changed the variety. She's gotten some pastas I've never even heard of before, like cool, fun shapes. And I'm like, oh, this is also amazing. But also for me, it's all about like the sauce. I'm like, this is just incredible. Right. And then a lot of the times now we're just getting like cheap, basically instant, spaghetti or angel hair or whatever. And I'm also like, this is also incredible. And it's so for me,
sauce.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the sauce. And I'm like, you don't have to go to the extra effort of like doing your own. And even like, sometimes we just get, cheap, basically, bargain basement value, spaghetti. And I'm like, it's great.
Well, since I am a shill for Aldi, I'll just tell you, Aldi has pretty pasta.
Yeah.
Good price.
We don't have an Aldi nearby.
Gotta figure
otherwise,
that out.
man, we gotta get that
Vegas.
Aldi sponsorship for our all of
I
our
know.
rest of the world listenership. All right, those were our breakfasts. After our breakfasts, we move to our breakfast in bed apologies. This is our chance to make right what we got wrong on a previous episode. I got a couple of factual things wrong last episode. First of all, we talked about Celebration Florida, and I was like, I don't think it's Disney affiliated. I was sort of wrong there. It was established by Disney. Disney created this like fake Truman Show city, but then they divested their ownership of it. But like they spent billions developing this community. They still run the utilities, according to Wikipedia, in Celebration, Florida. So that was not totally accurate. Also,
it's worth walking around, by the way. It's it feels like a different world. Yeah.
I've never been.
The Truman Show, like the Truman Show comp works. Yeah.
I mean, the Truman Show was filmed in that place. Is it Seaside to Florida? I have actually walked around there.
It's over near like Destin.
Yeah, it's like the 30A Gulf Coast Panhandle, Florida. Yeah. But we say Truman Show for Celebration because it's just an isolated community.
Right.
It's supposed to be idyllic. I don't know.
They could have easily filmed it there.
Yeah. And it's so close to Disney World. It's like right there. So I was a little bit wrong there. No, I misread something last episode. I fixed it in the audio version, but for the dozens of you who watched the YouTube version, overdubbing the video it's too hard, or it just looks bad. I said that B-Ball Paul Reed's agent, I said he was Ron Graves, and I just read it wrong. I was looking at it. His name's Ron Shade, which honestly feels like a fake name, but Ron Shade is Paul Reed's agent. I said Ron Graves. So apologies again to anyone affected by those factual errors. Also, Dave, do we need to say anything about our picking the Celtics to maybe have gotten worse, but then they went out and signed Lonnie Walker? Do we need to change our grade? Do we need to change our grade?
Well, it's funny, right? Like we talked about how come Lonnie Walker doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
I feel like Lonnie Walker is going to help them.
Well, so he's on an Exhibit 10, and I feel like there's almost no way that he makes the roster. I don't think.
I don't know.
But like, I don't know. He's good at scoring, and we had a debate whether or not he can score, but does he help your team? Is he that he's not a well-rounded basketball player? And then I saw some people being like, one of the great arguments for expansion is Lonnie Walker's on an Exhibit 10.
Right.
And Lonnie Walker's a guy who can not just on a garbage basketball team, he could average 12 points per game comfortably in most NBA rotations. Yeah, and so him on an Exhibit 10, it's like this is an argument for why we need more teams, or could use more teams. I'm also, I can go back to my pet arguments about this is also why tanking is bad, because if every team was trying to win, Lonnie Walker would have a contract, right? Because you could use more talent on your rosters. But anyways, all right. Actually, let's hit a few.
The league, look, expansion, they really should just add 2 more teams.
I mean, we all know they're going to.
Yeah.
And
COVID would have been the perfect opportunity. They had when they were shut down, they could have used the influx of cash to not have to go do the bubble thing. There were a lot of reasons why,
but I think the reason
financial was the big one.
My understanding of the situation as it is now, they did not want to do expansion before the next TV deal was done, because everyone wants to bank, all the current owners want to bank all that money. And then also they wanted a few more franchises to change hands. They want the Celtics to be sold for, was it, I can't remember, was it 6 billion or 8 billion? Whatever. They're hoping for some preposterous number. So then they can charge an insane expansion fee, and then all the owners will split up all that money. And so, but now things are set up. I think once the Celtics get sold, then things will be set up and things are going to move rapidly now that they have the TV deal in place.
I would guess we have 2 more teams in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. Larry Kuhn and I have had this conversation because he's more plugged in on that stuff than I am. And we talked about it. He said that this was during that shutdown season, kind of. But he was telling me that his expectation would be a franchise fee starts somewhere around $4 billion.
Yeah.
Seems pretty good. And that was a few years ago. So what, like, I think you're dead on there.
Yep.
Probably 6.
I mean, and so that's going to be
get a team in Seattle and Vegas.
Yep. So Seattle and Vegas, and then we get to do you have an opinion on which West team goes east? Because
the travel stuff is just, that's where I try to start first. It's like, okay, well, who's closer? But it's like a tie between New Orleans and Memphis.
I think for me, it's still Minnesota. Yeah. I mean,
they would make more sense in the Chicago, Milwaukee.
The problem geographically, like with moving either Memphis or New Orleans, of course, they're close to all the teams in the Southeast division.
Yeah.
But like Memphis and New Orleans are very close, and also very relatively close to Dallas and San Antonio, right. And Houston,
and Oklahoma City.
All of those are actually really nicely packed together. Meanwhile, Minnesota isn't close to anyone in the West. I mean, right. they're kind of close to Memphis, honestly, as far as just like a straight line flight, but like they're so much closer to every Eastern Conference team. So I think it makes sense. Yeah, we're going to get, so I think the expectation, yes, Seattle, yes, Vegas. The real question is, do they go big? Do they add like also Mexico City? No. Or also, because then if they went 4, then you could move to, my math right? No, you could add, then you can move 2 of those, Memphis and Minnesota. There'd be 17 in the East. Do this right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot though.
There'd be 17 in the West. All right. Too much.
That's a lot. I just, Mexico City to me is a pipe dream.
Yeah.
Infrastructure wise, it would be very difficult.
I mean, what about Vancouver?
I don't think they're going to go back to Vancouver. If they go to Seattle, I think that's it.
Seattle plus Vancouver plus Las Vegas plus Mexico City. Move the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves to the east. You're done.
I think you're more likely to see the Grizzlies move from Memphis than
how dare you
going back to Vancouver.
How dare you not understand the makeup of our Patreon supporters, Dave? How dare you?
I don't think they're leaving.
Disgusting.
I don't think Vancouver's getting a team either.
By the way, Jaren Jackson Jr. apparently pledged to stay in Memphis on Twitter yesterday. So
that's a disaster. I'm sorry.
Big news. What do you mean?
Because every time a player comes out and says, I'm staying in X small market.
Oh, you think no one's ever left the Grizzlies who we wanted to keep. Let's just mark that down. Let's actually hit a few more news items before we get to the meat of our show. These aren't big news items, but speaking of the Grizzlies, G.G. Jackson broke his foot playing pickup.
And you know what?
Yeah,
this is actually sad. You're the first person I thought of. I didn't think about G.G. Jackson. I thought about Keith. I
gotta say, when you get the team medical update email in August, it's terrifying. And for whatever reason on my phone, the Grizzlies team emails, they're always, the font is so small. Something about the formatting on my iPhone, when I open up their thing, it's not like any other email I get. It's like really wide and it's so tiny. The words are so tiny and I'm desperately scanning the email just to see what name. I'm like, oh no. Like, has Ja Morant hurt his shoulder again? Is Jaren Jackson Jr., like tore his ACL? So it's a horrifying, like your heart is racing. You're like, oh no, who is it? Like they're not even supposed to be getting hurt. And then you get to G.G. Jackson and then you feel kind of bad because you feel relieved. You're like, oh, he's our ninth guy. And then you're like, all right, what's the injury? So like, first thing was just finding out what the name was. And I'm like, is it Zach Edey? Oh, please don't be Zach Edey. But then it's like, okay, G.G. Jackson. All right, he's young. His body should heal quick. He's maybe 9th, 10th man.
5th metatarsal fracture.
And then you're like, all right, that's kind of a serious bone break because it's like 2 to 3 months, so he's going to miss the start of the season. It's bad. But when you start off with the sheer terror of this could be anything.
Right.
And you're like, it's your favorite team and someone's hurt bad enough to send out an email. in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
So you end up being a little bit relieved, even though you're like sad that now Gigi Jackson will not climb up the highest scoring teenagers of all time, because he has now going to miss like some of his remaining 20 games before he turns the age of 20. More NBA news, just again, not big stuff. Did you follow the Goran Dragic farewell basketball game? Were you invited, more importantly?
No, I wasn't invited.
Disappointing.
I would have, I mean, that honestly looked amazing.
Yeah.
Also, like, I love seeing Jokic having fun on a basketball court, and it's just like,
we don't have to feed that narrative. He has fun playing basketball.
I know. But there's a different kind of joy when he's playing with his people.
He's just goofing off.
Yeah. And the Jokic and Luka dynamic is
something.
I listen, if this was Team USA and these guys were palling around like this, I feel like we would all be saying, hold on. It would be like the Kevin Durant, Kyrie locker room tunnel video to us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think Jokic is ever leaving Denver. But this does make me think, wow, those guys would probably like to play together.
Well, so let's just go smaller stakes, because I mean, honestly, I think they understand. Most NBA players understand that outside of Kevin Durant, they understand they are these islands for their franchises, and like they are going to compete their whole lives against each other. They're not normally going to team up. Maybe at the very ends of their careers, they team up. But I'm saying smaller stakes. Why hasn't there been more just like put Bogdanovich on the Nuggets? Like, why isn't there more of just...
I mean, well, they did try to, I mean, so the Bogdan to Milwaukee made a lot of sense, because Giannis and Bogdan are apparently tight. How come Bogdanovich isn't seen as a better player? Like, am I just way off on him? I'm too high on him.
I mean, the Hawks are building around him. I guess
very good.
I don't know.
Yeah,
no, he's a good player.
If he was on the Nuggets, we wouldn't be having any of these conversations about KCP.
Yeah,
another ball handler, another shooter. I'm not sure. How come we haven't gotten a Euro super team yet?
I mean, I think the best one, and this is stealing from Ben Simmons, but like, why haven't the Magic gotten Dennis Schroeder? Just so they can have Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner, and like Dennis Schroeder, because there even is a positional need somewhat of like just a point guard. But it seems
he'd actually be pretty good there.
It seems like there'd be more Serbian players surrounding Jokic. This is like back when the Grizzlies tried to save Pau Gasol by bringing in Juan Carlos Navarro for a year. Teams should do this more. It's fun.
The Nuggets are bringing Micic in, right?
Or I think there was some talk, but how could they not work out when they were salary dumping Reggie Jackson?
Right.
How couldn't they bring back Micic? I don't know. Although Micic, man, that shot in the gold medal game when they were down 1 and he like pulls up from 26 feet with 14 seconds on the shot clock. Oh man. Speaking of Giannis, he got married. Chris Middleton was the best man. And I understand it, because like when you have multiple brothers, how do you pick one?
Right.
So you have to elevate someone. You can't break that tie. So you have to elevate somebody who stands alone. So I get it. I think a lot of people understand this scenario. There's nothing weird there.
I mean, I had a similar situation, only not brothers, but like a really close friend group.
I also had a somewhat similar thing where I had a friend group, and then I had it could have been my brother, and like maybe I just should have gone brother, but I was like, I didn't know who to pick. And then someone had to drop out of the wedding, and I promoted a guy from not a groomsman to best man.
Wow.
It was just a wild call up.
That's like choosing the Supreme Court justice, but choosing the chief.
Yeah. Or it was just, was someone not in line where I'm like, I don't know how to break this tie. We're going to just elevate a new guy. Bring him in.
I chose the guy who was just the most on time, reliable, and who I thought wouldn't mess anything up.
That's Chris Middleton.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. Finally, Evan Fournier is leaving the NBA to play for Olympiacos. Evan Fournier's NBA career went out with a little bit of a whimper.
Yeah.
It didn't really have the big impact his last couple seasons. Now he's going to go play in Greece.
I bet he's going to have a pretty good year.
I bet he will. Anyways, Dave, let's take a quick break. And then we will come back and jump in with our Butter or Parkay Southwest Division preview. All right, Dave, you know this, but for the listeners, we look at every team's offseason moves and we try to judge whether or not we think they got better, which we call butter. Now, most fan bases usually think their team got better every single year. They are like, listen, we signed to this guy. We traded for this guy. This guy's getting better. This young guy's going to make a leap. We drafted this guy. And they're all generally very optimistic. I think this division we're doing today, the Southwest Division, every team, every front office in this division thinks they got better.
100%.
So what we're going to do is try to figure out if we agree. If they got better, we're calling it butter. Or if we actually say, you know what, your dreams of improvement, it's just fake. It's an imitation. We call that Parkay. So I'm excited to do this division because I wonder if I get too optimistic about some of these teams. Maybe there'll be some pushback. I mean, maybe we'll agree. We basically agreed last week on the Atlantic, but it's an interesting division and it's going to be an extremely competitive division. Now let's go through these teams. Let's start with, we'll do it based on the standings from last season. So Dave, kick us off with the Dallas Mavericks. Let me know what their offseason was all about after they lost in the NBA Finals.
After they lost in the finals, well, they lost Derrick Jones Jr. He went to the Clippers, but they replaced him with Najee Marshall. I think that's maybe it's not a 1-for-1 replacement, but pretty close. And I actually think Najee Marshall, being a little bit younger, a little bit more runway to get better. They brought in Klay Thompson. That was their biggest move. Shooting kind of hampered them a little bit. They got to the finals because they got hot and they got beat because they were cold and they brought in Klay Thompson. Managed to pull Quentin Grimes out of basically nothing to get involved with the trade with the Pistons, got Quentin Grimes, and then they signed Spencer Dinwiddie and brought him back. So got more ball handling, some size. I mean, this is all stuff that they could have used in the playoffs, to be honest. They also lost Josh Green. But to me, I like Quentin Grimes in that position a little bit better. I think he's got a higher offensive upside. I mean, I really think that they had an interesting summer for a team that went to the finals. And in my opinion, butter.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, because the guy's leaving, it comes down to basically, does Klay Thompson and Najee Marshall give you more than Derrick Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr., and Josh Green gave you? I mean, like Tim Hardaway Jr., he is a tough one because like he was I think a source of frustration among Mavericks fans. He was very inconsistent, but like he would have stretches over the last several seasons where like seemed like a very important part of what they did. Now he was less important once they picked up PJ Washington at the trade deadline and they started playing just more PJ Washington, more Derrick Jones Jr. Like that's the question. I think
Kyrie trade really, I in my opinion, bringing in Kyrie, that minimized Tim Hardaway's usefulness for them because they needed a defender out there, somebody who could guard on the wing. And if Tim Hardaway Jr. isn't hitting shots, he's not giving you anything else.
Okay, so my question, my controversial question, my Klay Thompson hater question, how is that different than Klay Thompson? I mean, Klay Thompson has 4 rings. Thompson,
he hits shots, though.
Yeah.
Klay Thompson on this team, I mean, he's going to shoot 40% again. And he's going to, at a high volume that, frankly, Dallas hasn't had. They haven't had a guy who's going to get up 9-10 a game and hit 4 or 5. The people who are going to benefit the most, Luka, Kyrie, and PJ Washington. Because Klay Thompson is going to be guarded every time. There's not going to be this thing where, Derrick Jones is out there and he might hit him, but he might not. And we're not going to leave the paint to contest that shot. Klay Thompson is going to get guarded. So I think that that in and of itself, great. The
Mm-hmm.
way that they can switch defensively, I think helps them out quite a bit because it's not like Klay is going to be guarding point guards. Klay being able to guard bigger wings, even some fours for them, I think is going to be fine. My bigger concern is who guards the best player on the other team.
Yeah.
In the starting lineup, right? PJ Washington can guard. I don't think he can do that job. So, if the other guys are going to step up defensively, it doesn't matter as much. But I do think that Klay brings so much on offense that if they could find a way to make that work, it's going to be much better. Maybe it's Najee Marshall is playing a lot with Klay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I think my formula is I'm gonna say Klay Thompson is, yes, more dependable, better shooter than Tim Hardaway Jr. I would say he's like, I don't know, he's comfortably 50% better or something.
Sure.
This math is not going to check out when I get to the end. I just wanted to lay that down first. So he's like 50% better. If we go to a 1-for-1 comparison of Najee Marshall against Derrick Jones Jr., for me, that's a question mark. I think he made solid points.
Right.
Probably a more consistent open shooter, younger, so more of a runway to get better. But also Derrick Jones Jr. was awesome for this team last year.
100%.
I think you're hoping Najee Marshall steps into that role, but it's not guaranteed he's as good. Josh Green, I mean, some people thought maybe they were underwater with that contract. You just had to move on. Like, Josh Green was somewhat useful. And I don't even know who the 1-for-1 player comparison is for this. Is this more Dante Exum minutes? Is it more Jaden Hardy minutes?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I do like them picking up Spencer Dinwiddie just to have a dribbler, even though Spencer Dinwiddie is kind of getting maybe to the end of his usefulness in the NBA. I do think the team is better. I even am comfortable factoring in Derek Lively just being year 2 better. Like more minutes. Like beginning of the year, Derek Lively was like, I don't know, like sometimes not playing. And they were, like
not season,
not deciding to close for him. Yeah. So I think that is going to be a big boost. So I do think, yes, I think this team looks very, very good on paper. And I'm comfortable with saying they are in fact better or butter. One question, they're like $5 million into the luxury tax, which feels like something they should maybe try to get rid of. I don't know if they can do something to move like Maxi Kleber or Dwight Powell. Those guys making a lot of money still. They combine to make $15 million. Will they focus more on that with a new ownership group? I don't know. By the way, Dave, so for each team, after we say butter or Parkay, let's go through who we think they're closing 5, or either that or your favorite 5-man lineup. I mean, I don't even think we know who starts for this team. I mean, Kyrie and Luka.
I think Lively will probably start. I mean,
the Gafford or Lively thing doesn't matter. No. But we'll say, one of those guys starts, but it seems like Lively is the superior player now.
PJ Washington probably starts at the 4.
I would think.
And Klay at the 3. There's no way Klay isn't starting, at least to start the season.
Okay.
I don't know if they promised him that he would start.
Yeah.
But I would assume.
I think when you think about that question you asked about who is going to guard the other team's best player, that would be the reason maybe to eventually bring Klay off the bench. But then there's still not a clear cut. I mean, I think it makes maybe more sense if you had like PJ Washington and Najee Marshall playing at the same time. But I don't know if it matters really. I think most of the time, probably starting Kyrie and Luka and Klay and PJ Washington and either Lively or Gafford. Is there a fun 5-man unit you like more than that, or a 5-man unit that you would close over those guys?
I mean, not really. Luka and Kyrie have to be out there. I think Klay is going to have to be out there.
Yep.
They need a center. I mean, it seems like that's going to be the likely 5. Now, the Klay versus Najee Marshall thing is interesting to me, and I think that's going to be a game by game debate. If Klay's ice cold, he's not closing.
Although, so I've been poking fun at this most of the summer. We have elevated Najee Marshall in our minds somehow.
Oh yeah.
Because he was like the hipster podcaster take of like, who's going to be a good free agent signing? Najee Marshall. And like Najee Marshall, I haven't looked this up, but I don't think he was ever the closing option for the Pelicans. So it would be weird if all of a sudden he inherited that role.
They've got Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
no, we're gonna get to the Pelicans. They have a lot of lineup options that are hard to figure out. But yeah, I think this is a good squad with some good options. Like we didn't even mention, like I don't even think we've said Dante Exum yet. And like when Dante Exum stays healthy, he's a very useful player to have. Maybe they get something from Omex Prosper, but I think we can move on. This is a very, very good team that we think actually got butter. Do you have a big question or anything that we haven't hit for this?
The big question is going to be their defense. Yep. You know, the reason that they made this run to the finals was because they developed an elite defense during the season last year, especially after trade deadline. Do they have the pieces that can have an elite defense? You've now got 3 non-defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Clay at least competes most of the time and sometimes does okay. But you've got 3 non-defenders. Yep. What's going to happen there? Is this the year that Luka says, "Hey, I'm going to be a 2-way guy"? Right?
Did Luka do cardio this offseason? That's
well, you just talked about Night of the Dragon.
Oh, and by the way, maybe the big question is something that Sean Keane brought up on this month's Patreon exclusive bonus episode. Sean Keane wondering how much will Klay Thompson like adjusting to an offense where all of his looks are going to be much different than the way he got looks for the Warriors. The Warriors were so much motion offense, so much movement. He had so many little like comfortable routines of how he got his shots off. And we think he's going to be wide open a lot on this team, but like, how does he adjust? Just standing, waiting for the ball. Maybe there will be an adjustment period there, but those are good problems to have, I guess, for the Mavericks with a lot of talent. Let's move to the team that finished second in the Southwest last season. That's the New Orleans Pelicans. They only won 1 fewer game than the Mavericks last season. They were 49-33, and the Pelicans made a big splash this offseason by trading for DeJounte Murray. They also didn't really lose that many guys. I mean, I guess in the trade, you lose Dyson Daniels. They did lose Najee Marshall to the Mavericks in free agency. Also, they lost some of their big guys. Jonas Valanciunas and Larry Nance are gone. I don't know if they really replaced them. They signed Daniel Tice. They drafted Yves Missy. They brought back 2-way big man Trey Jemison, who I think is going to have to play for them. Also signed Javonte Green at the end of free agency. I also think, looking at their depth chart, they're going to need him to play. So this team.
Well, wait. Now you left out.
What did I leave out?
Huge signing. Carlo Matkovic.
Matkovic comes in to help out.
They brought him in from Birmingham. I have this sneaking suspicion he's going to have to play for them.
They don't. They're weird.
They have no one else.
They have 7 guys that are quite good, and you're not totally sure who's going to play. Maybe it's just 6, but like I'm looking at their team with incumbent CJ McCollum now going to play alongside DeJounte Murray. And then you have Brandon Ingram still there. By the way, Brandon Ingram did not show up to the Pelicans voluntary team workouts in California because he's been the subject of trade rumors for forever. You have Zion, you still have Herb Jones, you still have Trey Murphy. It's like, we don't know what the starting lineup's going to look like. I don't know what the closing 5 is going to look like. And they do just have, maybe beyond that though, a lack of depth in the front court and I would say even ball handling. So they're an interesting team.
I mean, unless the idea is that Zion is one of their ball handlers, which I think, evidence would suggest that's how they're going into the season. I just don't think that they do have some, like they have this really interesting team that fits in fun ways, but having Zion as your center, I don't think that works for the regular season. I don't know if it works in the playoffs for an entire playoff run. I just think you need some size at some point. There's so many bigs that actually are effective in the NBA.
I think right now you got to assume they are going to start Zion Williamson at center. I actually reached out to Shamit Dua, who covers the Pelicans. I'm like, hey, who starts for your team? And he's like, no idea. No one knows. So I would guess my reasoning that Zion starts, and maybe you have the same reasoning. My reasoning that Zion starts at the 5 is just because if he doesn't, like if you start Daniel Tice or Yves Missy, that means 2 of Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray aren't starting.
Right.
And that seems strange. That seems weird. I can't imagine a situation. I mean, obviously DeJounte's going to start. Maybe McCollum comes off the bench. There's no way with the way things I think are so fragile in the relationship with Brandon Ingram. There's no way you ask him to be a 6th man when he's looking to get an extension. So like you look at Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, one of those guys coming off the bench, but I don't think you can bring another guy off the bench, which is what you would have to do if you start a center that's not Zion. So I think you and I, we're saying yes, DeJounte, yes, Brandon Ingram, yes, Zion starts. For me, my guess is going to be CJ McCollum and Trey Murphy, and then Herb Jones is the 6th man. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Start Herb Jones and bring CJ off the bench. But
I think that's what they should do. I don't know if they will. I think
that would be the most fun.
As a veteran leader, that's the type of thing where CJ McCollum needs to be like, okay, I'll do it. Yes.
Right.
But
shortest guy in that lineup would be DeJounte Murray at 6'7".
Yeah. I mean, that lineup is so fun. I'm sorry, CJ McCollum, but like
it's all arms.
It's all arms.
I mean, switch everything. That defense would be pretty tough, to be honest with you.
I mean, the next maybe most fun, we're kind of jumping around here. We haven't even said if we think they're better or Parkay, but the next most fun one for me is like the no Brandon Ingram lineup, where it's just DeJounte and CJ plus Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and Zion, where it's like, that's a tough 5-man lineup. That thing seems awesome. But all right, look at this team. 49 wins last year, and we're not focusing necessarily on the win total. We're just saying theoretically with last year's squad, if it played this year's squad, if that was possible, if you could do it on 2K, which squad wins? And do you think the addition of DeJounte Murray and bringing him in and meanwhile losing Jonas Valanciunas, Larry Nance, Dyson Daniels, does that make this year's team better?
I'm going to say Parkay. The Larry Nance loss is actually massive. It didn't make any, like, I understand you want to get DeJounte, he's a better player, but Larry Nance, I thought was going to wind up being their starting center. And he's super important to what they do defensively and offensively. He was like a big cog for them, and they didn't come up with a replacement. That being said, there's a world in which they do play this smaller lineup. Zion stays healthy and all of that's moot because they do have a dynamic defense, or at least the potential for it. But I think losing Valanciunas and Larry Nance, it loses sight of some of the stuff. You know, in baseball, we talk a lot about like innings eaters.
Yep.
And in basketball, like it's an 82 game season. You need bigs to eat minutes. They eat rebounds. They really just do some of the things that get lost that make it so your team can be competitive every single night. Whereas for Zion, the degree of difficulty is just a little bit higher when he's playing the 5 full time. And, you know, we know like sustainability is always a concern with him. But small ball centers in general, we've kind of seen that it's a thing. By the time you get to the end of games, those guys are getting beat for rebounds. And even Draymond Green, like he was playing 8 minutes a night at center.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest concern and why I think they got slightly worse. I think just some of the fits right now are not as good as they were last year. That being said, they're one move away from being extremely butter. Yeah. Homemade butter.
Yeah, I'm with you where I understand the DeJounte Murray trade, and I think you had to get better guard play in there, and it didn't cost them that much. And I've always actually admired how they have been willing to trade, to move the picks they got in the Anthony Davis deal. They keep, like, it doesn't always work out. They've had some misfires. Didn't they spend one to get Devontae Graham in there like that? Whoops. So, yeah. But like, yeah, their losses of Najee Marshall, Larry Nance, Jonas, and Dyson, that's a lot of innings eaters. And I don't know, when you look at the back half of the roster too, it's kind of garbage. Like there's not a lot of real elite players or even like upside guys. I mean,
They've got those 6 guys, and that's about it.
That's about it. Like Jose Alvarado, I'm not sure if he's an elite backup. I mean, he was, even when injured, it seemed like one of the most crucial guys in their closing 5 in the playoffs last year. So maybe I'm wrong there. Jordan Hawkins, a lot of upside
for them. Yep. See, this was why I hated. Well, I hate the Nance loss for them, because it was Alvarado and Nance that changed things for them in that series when they were more competitive. So
I guess, though, if I were forced to pick, which I am, I'm gonna say just getting the upside of DeJounte in that backcourt. Yeah, I'm gonna say a little pat of butter, just slightly better. But like,
look, if the Zion body watch, if this is like,
it's just whatever angle the camera is, apparently, whatever Instagram.
Well,
it's like, he's super skinny. It's maybe not. What? Yeah.
All right. It's not even. He mentioned how much he weighed, and he gave a poundage. I believe him. I have no reason to think that he would lie. And he said like 282 pounds or something very specific. Unless someone really like coached him up on lying, that's too specific of a number. So I feel like, and now I'd like to see him at 265, but
like you and Coach Thorpe are the body watch guys. Like,
I mean, it's one of the bigger differentiators.
DeMarcus Cousins needs to lose 40 pounds. That was David Thorpe's all-time.
Think about it. He would have been incredible.
Would have been a beast.
He would have been incredible. I mean, the WNBA it's like become like my Sunday tradition. Mm-hmm. And there are some players that year over year, they've improved their body so much. I don't feel comfortable talking about it though.
Right.
I don't talk about the WNBA for work anyway. So like, no one pays me to do it. So I just don't. But like with the guys, no problem. We can body shame here because look, man, being a professional athlete, like your body is actually a differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
Jokic's whole career changed when he gained endurance and clearly put in work. And with Zion, this is your, how many? 5
or 6?
Who knows? I mean,
same as Ja.
Yeah. But it's about time. Like, you are a professional athlete. Act like one.
They're one of the harder teams to evaluate, I feel like, as far as
they are
year-over-year improvement. They've been weird for a while. No, the pieces still don't totally fit. I mean, they have the great luxury of having, I think, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, where those guys are just put them in any lineup and it seems awesome. Those guys can play 2 through 4, basically. Who cares?
Look, if you're the Pelicans and you have those 2 guys, how is everything you're doing not built to have those 2 guys playing 35 minutes a night?
You make a great point. Let's move to the next team in the division. Last year was the Houston Rockets, who made massive improvements to finish 41-41. Dave, what did they do in the offseason?
Well, they drafted Reed Shepherd.
The end.
That's a big deal. They also got AJ Griffin from Atlanta. I don't know how you like him.
He's just a flyer. Why not? Let's see if he.
They lost Boban and
Vibes guy.
Bullock, but but other than that, they brought back Aaron Holiday. Fred VanVleet obviously is still going to be there. They didn't move him or Dylan Brooks, like a lot of people thought maybe they would consider after the little run last spring.
No sell high on Dylan.
Yeah. And then Alperen Şengün should be back and healthy. So
I feel like
Houston,
they stood pat with what their roster was.
Yeah.
They ended up winning in the lottery and getting up there to get Reed Shepherd. I mean, maybe one guy we consider in addition is Steven Adams. Still, because they traded for him at the trade deadline. He, of course, didn't play last season. Still huge question marks about him. But other than that, this team just brought their squad back.
They're so young. And
they're so young. You got to
assume these guys, I mean, we watched them improve during the season last year. I mean, Jalen Green's March and April. I'm not going to be a guy who falls in love with a guy in the spring and thinks that this is who he is, but he certainly showed that he's a pretty good player. Mm-hmm. Whether he's going to be one of the top 50 in the league or not, I don't know, but he can play defense and he can definitely score. So I think this is going to be another year where they're trying to figure out who they are, but I bet by mid-season, they look like a team that's ready to compete for the playoffs a year from then.
Yeah. I actually think this team is going to compete for the playoffs this season, despite
playoffs, not play in.
I think they will be, yes, I think they will have a
Okay.
chance at the top, it being, sixth or fifth. I have a lot of belief in a lot of the young guys, and whatever Ime Udoka did with Van Vliet and then with Dylan Brooks to get that season out of Dylan and to get this team to play defense, I was very impressed by. And in this exercise, a lot of times I scoff at internal development because I'm like, every team, every player on every team is trying to get better year over year. For this exercise on my show, I want to look at the talent you added. That's generally how I do it, but I do think it's fair when you're talking about a team that has Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. and Cam Whitmore and Amin Thompson and Tari Eason and Jalen Green.
They actually have too many young guys.
They have too many young guys, but to think those guys all could get better, it makes sense. And then you bring in Reed Shepherd, that talent in the draft. I'm like, why wouldn't they be better this year? So for me, I'm going to slap a big old pat of butter on this team. I think they are butter, and I think they're going to be hard to play. And I think absolutely they're going to be in the race for like the 6th seed.
Who winds up with Tari Eason?
So you mentioned the too many young guys, and I think that'll be a fun exercise for us right now to pick like a favorite 5-man lineup. There's too many guys. You ask 100 Rocket fans, like, who do you think should close? You're probably going to get 50 different answers. If you ask them who's your favorite 5-man lineup, you might get 100 different answers. There's so many like fun ways this can go. You look at like Cam Whitmore, who just came on like gangbusters last season. Cam Whitmore, who should have been a Los Angeles Clipper if Ballmer was fine with paying luxury tax. You think of Ballmer as being willing to pay whatever, but like they cut costs and lost that pick. Meanwhile, the Rockets get Cam Whitmore, who slid in the draft. Like, this team has so many options. So let's say, I think we're guessing the starters are going to be their starters they used most of the time last year. Probably. Van Vliet, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Şengün. Their second unit, if that's the case, their second unit is probably, and let's just say Steven Adams is 80% back. Sure. If Steven Adams is 100% back, all of a sudden this team has even more amazing options, because Steven Adams was a top like 15 NBA center when healthy. Oh, yeah. And I don't actually think he's going to be healthy again, unfortunately. But let's say he's 80% back, and your second unit is something like Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore, Amin Thompson, Tari Eason, Steven Adams.
Pretty good. That's a lot of rebounding.
That's awesome. That's going to crush other teams' second units. Like, they could be one of those teams that wins, like, your starting lineup has like a +2 net rating, and then your bench lineup has like a +15 net rating. And oh, by the way, you won 51 games, because that's a regular season formula for winning 51 games. I mean, maybe you lose in the first round that way,
those
but
Clippers teams were doing that for years. The pre-Kawhi and PG Clippers teams, they were doing that for years. The bench would come in and just clean up. I mean, this is the thing. This is why having like adult basketball players coming off your bench is so important.
They're 11 through 14, which doesn't matter in the playoffs. But if I think this is accurate, like Aaron Holiday, Jayshawn Tate, Jeff Green, and Jock Landale, you compare that to the 11 through 14 on like the Pelicans or the Grizzlies or the Spurs, it's no contest. This team has a lot of talent. Of course, the question mark is going to be the high end talent. Yeah. What does it do?
Right. Well, I was going to ask you, what if Şengün, what if this is the year that Şengün is actually an all-star?
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising, because he compiles those stats. And if the team is whatever, if they're 30-18 at the all-star break or something, like, you would think, yeah, Şengün gets in. The question marks, there's so many question marks around this team. They looked awesome last year when Şengün did not play. And then it's like, who is supposed to play on this team? Who's supposed to close? So Dave, let's just go with, what's your closing lineup? If you're coaching the team, are you sticking with those starters with Jalen Green in there and Dylan Brooks and Jabari and Şengün and Fred VanVleet? Or are you doing something different?
I'm probably going with those starters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why you would, obviously opposing lineups depending, but I think that that starting lineup is probably what you close with.
I think the question mark for me comes, and this is maybe the other big question about this team, is like, what is Jalen Green's future on the team? Right. Is this a team? Is this a player they want to give a big extension to? They want to build around him or consider him part of their main core? And I think that also boils down to just like closing lineups. And like, I think you look at Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks in that 5, and you'd say, hey, maybe some nights it's going to be better to have Amen Thompson out there, or it's going to be better to have Reed Sheppard. How good is Reed Sheppard out of the box? If he is the same level of efficiency or close to it, what he showed at Kentucky, and this guy is making 45% of his threes and can be a passable defender, but also a effective playmaker, then that's a guy that's going to be hard to keep off the court. And then like Cam Whitmore, I mean, the guy's just a bucket. And so then you start mixing and matching. I will say my favorite 5-man lineup for this team, this is, I'm not saying best, but my favorite is not going to have Şengün or Jalen Green. I think I would do Van Vliet and then Amen Thompson. And then I'm going to get weird. Tari Eason. Maybe I'm going to leave Dillon in and also have Jabari.
Are you allergic to shooting?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Give me Van Vliet. No, give me Reed Sheppard. Reed Sheppard, Cam Whitmore, Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr.
Okay.
Roll it out there, see what happens.
So now we're doing a 2K dynasty team.
Yeah. Tell me your favorite 5.
I think it's the starters. I think it's Van Vliet.
That's the one Jalen you find Green most interesting? Okay, fine.
No. Okay. Of all lineup combinations, that's not the most interesting.
You got to have Amen out there because for me, Amen Thompson is my most interesting player because I don't like shooters. So yeah. Right. Anybody who could average 5 stocks and I'm in.
See, that's why I love Tari Eason, actually. Like, Tari Eason
same thing.
Is such a throwback. Yeah, look, he reminds me of Dennis Rodman.
A little bit.
Degree. And I think Tari Eason, unfortunately, is probably going to be the odd man out there. One of them, because they just have too many guys. But I wonder if this isn't where they start thinking about consolidation trade and try to find a wing that fits better than Jalen Green, or you know what I mean? Someone who can play both directions. But and by the way, Jalen Green did show that he can defend a little bit. We'll see if that holds up. But Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, like that's two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. If you threw them out there together, they could create so much chaos. Like you could actually this team could press. This team has the bodies and the athleticism to actually pull off a press. But you can't, this is the NBA. You can't do that.
I'm now thinking my favorite 5-man lineup might just be
great. This would be a great college team, man. I would love this college team so much.
I know. I was just thinking about the second unit. Just Reed Sheppard, Cam Whitmore, Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, Steven Adams. Oh my God. He stole my heart. I love it.
Pretty good.
Let's move on to my team, the Memphis Grizzlies, and we'll do that right after this quick break. All right, the Memphis Grizzlies, Dave, they're a weird one for the Butter or Parkay preview because you don't know exactly which Grizzlies team we're even talking about. After the trade deadline, of course, they gave up, or they moved on from Steven Adams and Xavier Tillman, to pick up some second-round picks, and they were hurt. So, it's not like we don't look at, hey, they lost Lamar Stevens and Yuta Watanabe. No. It's kind of a useless exercise. I want to compare them to last year's healthy team before they made trades. So basically it would be this offseason, they added Zach Edey. They picked up a couple of guys into the second round and Jalen Wells and Cam Spencer. And then they salaried up Zaire Williams. And that's really it. But I want to say the year over change that I want to look at is you lost Steven Adams. You lost Xavier Tillman. You brought in Zach Edey. Also, you got back Brandon Clark because he did play last year, but he had an Achilles thing, and we knew he was only going to play, if at all, just a few games at the end of the season. He did play a few games at the end of the season. So what do you think about this team, Dave? They're asking Zach Edey to basically replace Steven Adams, and then they're saying, now we're healthy. Is that enough to be butter for you in this exercise?
I mean, they will be better. So yes.
Well, they'll be better than 27 wins, but I'm saying last year's theoretical team coming into the season.
Not better.
I think it's a fair point. Also, if we frame it that way and we don't look at the player acquisition, the one thing that you would say, I think they're better this year coming into the season is because last year we did not know that Vince Williams Jr. was a guy. He wasn't in the rotation.
But for this team,
yeah,
honestly, like the hole in the middle, and Zach Edey, maybe he fills it. Maybe he is good, and maybe the rebounding that they need, he can provide all of it. But losing Steven Adams crushed their offense. I mean, in a lot of ways, it crushed their offense nearly as much as losing Ja. Not the same, but different. One of Memphis's calling cards has been offensive rebounding. They take more shots than other teams. Mm-hmm. Just straight up, that's the numbers game that they play. We are going to get up more shots. And when you do that, when you get more bites at the apple, and that's why they've had such a, it's not an efficient offense, but an effective offense in years past. And I just don't know if they're going to have, if Edey's going to be as good as Adams was. That being said, you can see a world in which having Zach Edey makes Jaren Jackson's life easier, better, more effective, especially on the offensive end. He's going to set some of the biggest screens that I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And Ja Morant is going to have runways to the basket, but also they're going to go under a lot of those screens, and Ja's going to have to shoot, and he's going to have to make. So, I think Desmond Bane is probably going to be the guy that has the biggest jump this season, because his ability to shoot off the dribble is going to go very well with Zach Edey setting screens. But other than that, where's the improvement coming from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I know among the Grizzlies fan base, which I'm closely connected to, there's just a lot of excitement over the reps that Desmond Bane and Jaren got last season as being number ones, albeit number ones on a bad team. Mm-hmm. That then when you add that to Ja Morant, suddenly the offense won't be so dependent on offensive rebounding, because that was the formula. The formula for the Grizzlies was you have Steven Adams in there screening and then rebounding all our misses. And that was the formula for success when they lost Steven Adams in the 2023 playoffs. That's why you lost to the Lakers. You didn't have any bigs. There was no Steven Adams, no Brandon Clark. And so they've now asked Zach Edey to replace Steven Adams and Xavier Tillman. I mean, Xavier Tillman, he's a useful guy to have around. And then they're hoping that Vince Williams Jr. and then a healthy Marcus Smart. And that also makes the exercise weird because Marcus Smart didn't play last year. Ja Morant only played 9 games last year. That's the question mark. I think this team is going to be very, very good. And I think this team is certainly going to be in competition for home court advantage in the West. When we do this weird arbitrary exercise that I've created, it's hard to judge. Is this team butter? I believe so much in Vince Williams Jr. that when I turn back the clocks at the beginning of last year, I'm like, man, we have Vince Williams Jr. and we have Zach Edey. So because of that, maybe I'll say we are, but the roster is so similar. I mean, it's not the Rockets where it's totally similar, but they essentially, they brought back everyone. And now they're hoping they will actually be healthy, and we'll see what it's supposed to look like together. So it's a tough one. By the way, we think the starters are Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, although Vince Williams Jr. might actually start over Marcus Smart.
Yeah, Marcus Smart should come off the bench, man.
He should. Whether or not that's something that Taylor Jenkins feels comfortable asking Marcus Smart to do.
Maybe he closes, but he should come off the bench.
Yeah. Their second unit, probably Luke Kennard, Vince Williams Jr., Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, maybe Conchar, maybe LaRavia, because G.G. Jackson's going to be out for maybe the first 10 to 15 games of the season with his foot injury. I don't know. What's your favorite? So Dave, what's your favorite 5-man lineup? Or even if you're closing games, what are you going to?
I'm proud. This is where the Zach Edey question, I don't have information to answer.
Right. We don't have that information.
So I'm thinking Jaren and I would probably go with Brandon Clark.
Same, closing. Brother.
and then depending on the night, right? Do you need Marcus Smart tonight, or do you need, Vince Williams? That's obviously Ja, Jaren, and Desmond are closing. Ja is a debate to me because if you need defense, maybe you play Marcus Smart over Ja.
That's crazy talk, although I'll entertain
I know
it.
It's never going to happen.
I mean, Ja only averages like 30 and 10 in playoff games, but
Yeah, but he gives up 30.
He's a gamer. He's a winner.
He gives up 30 for sure.
My favorite five, if I'm not going to include Brandon Clark, I think the closing lineup is definitely going to be Ja, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Mm-hmm. The twist on that is going to be, what if there's no Brandon Clark, just Jaren at the 5? Because like Jaren Jackson Jr., Vince Williams Jr., and Marcus Smart have to play together. The world needs to see that. It might be amazing. And then just add Desmond Bane in. Then I will entertain. It might be more fun to, even as far as this like weird podcaster brain, then it's maybe more fun to not have Ja. We're like, all right, let's put a BC.
Luke Kennard, get a shooter
Luke Kennard shooter or something. But the question mark on Zach Edey. For other teams, I scoff at rookies. And so I can't then on my favorite team be like, oh yeah, we're better because we drafted a guy with the 9th pick. It's like that. Despite looking good in 5 quarters of summer league basketball, it's a huge question
mark.
Rolled
his ankle twice in 5 quarters of basketball.
He was never hurt in like 5 years at Purdue. Then he gets hurt both games he plays in summer league.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's totally fair to say they're Parkay when you do this exercise. I
think they're going to have a much better record, obviously.
Yep.
But I don't know. The ceiling feels lower.
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting thought. I was pretty low. I didn't think the team had a super high ceiling last year.
What is this could be inertia, man. Like for me, right? It could just be the Grizzlies were doing this, right? They were the hot young team that was going to be in the conference finals.
Dave is doing an ascending.
Yes, I am doing
line with his hand.
Line.
He's doing a rocket shooting to the sky for the audio listeners.
Yeah, let me describe that. But now they've been passed by a few teams. And so maybe I'm just
it
is off that a little bit. When
you lose that momentum, when you lose 55 games, when you go through off the court issues with your team, it makes sense that all of a sudden you're going to be more excited about the Thunder and the Timberwolves and the teams that just made the finals and the Mavs. And so
will we get Ja Morant rehabilitation 3.0?
I assume
if they have a winning record at Christmas.
If they don't have a winning record by Christmas, that would be stunning. It really would. I don't think I'm being a homer when I say that. Like,
I think they're going to be pretty good
with the talent this team has. Like, they should be quite good.
The West is a nightmare, though.
The West is a nightmare, but in a good way. It's going to be so fun to watch.
Yeah.
But when I stack up the rosters, there's no way the Grizzlies aren't in the top like 7 talent wise. And then I think I just trust enough in Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Vince Williams Jr. They're going to get it done. I'll say slight butter to not lose my listeners. Let's move to the let's move to the final team, Dave. The San Antonio is this right? The San Antonio Spurs won 5 fewer games than the Grizzlies despite Victor Wembanyama playing all season. How's that possible?
Victor Wembanyama was basically the only professional basketball player on the team last year. So,
yeah. All right, Dave, the Spurs went 22-60. What were their big offseason moves?
All right. Well, they lost Devontae Graham and
how do they replace
Dominic Barlow? So, but luckily they managed to snag professional basketball player Harrison Barnes. They signed Chris Paul to a $10 million contract. They drafted Stephen Castle, who I don't know if you got a chance to see him in summer league. I like him. They also brought in Malachi Flynn, who's seems like he's an NBA body at least. And they brought back a few guys, but biggest ones to me, getting Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. You now have, number one, your defense is going to be better. Already, they were the worst defense in the league, except for when Wemby was on the court, and they were top 5. Now you're going to probably have a top 7 or 8 defense overall.
You think so?
Maybe, man. Like Wemby is better too. And we just saw it. Yep. Wemby had an awful offensive Olympics and he was the best player on the court when he was out there. I think that this team clearly is butter. Clearly is butter. You added 2 guys who are not what's a good word for lost? That's not lost.
You mean I would just say you added 2 win now players.
You added two guys who know how to play basketball.
Yeah, absolute professional basketball gentlemen.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's two more than they were able to put on the court last year around Wemby. And what this is going to do is this is also going to help some of these other young guys. Devin Vassell is going to have to figure out you can't shoot every time, and you have to do stuff without the basketball in your hands. That's going to be hugely important for them. It's going to create, Chris Paul is going to organize their offense. Post-entry passes are not going to be an adventure. And Harrison Barnes just shows up and goes to work.
Who's posting up in this situation? Just Victor Wembanyama? Are you talking about the Mamukelashvili post-ups?
Hey, listen, now Mamu, they also re-signed Sandro Mamukelashvili.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because that's a pretty good third big to have out there behind Wemby. And honestly, I actually think him and Wemby can play together a little bit when you want to play bigger.
Who starts for this basketball team outside of Chris Paul and Wembanyama? I mean, Devin Vassell.
Who
are my other two?
I mean, maybe it could be.
Is Wemby the 5? Johnson?
Yes. Yeah.
He's just starting 5. You don't feel like.
No. I mean, that whole thing is over.
I don't totally get the roster. Like I like that they got Harrison Barnes. They were paid to take on Harrison Barnes, or they picked him up basically for free, which is fine. And bringing Chris Paul in for just a semblance of competence from the point guard spot, like him and Trey Jones should work fine. But the rest of the roster, it still doesn't make sense to me. Where I'm like, I guess if Wemby's your 5, but like there's no real. I mean, 4,
Jeremy Sohan could be their 4. Yeah, if it's not going to be, I assume it's going to be Harrison Barnes at the 4.
Yeah.
And you could do Sohan and Barnes with Vassell and Chris Paul. I mean, that could be your starting 5.
So
at least gives you some switchability. It gives you some lineup flexibility, I guess. Some shooting.
So that was with Keldon Johnson as a 6th man.
Or you do Keldon Johnson and you bring in Sohan off the bench.
I think my guess would be Harrison Barnes off the bench. So it would be like Sohan at the 4, and then like Keldon Johnson, Vassell, and Chris Paul alongside Wemby. I do like that. I think if Steph Castle is any good at all, which we don't honestly know if he will be, he wasn't overwhelmingly impressive in summer league, but we can't take a ton from that. But like if your second unit, you have Trey Jones, Steph Castle, and in my scenario, Harrison Barnes, along with Zach Collins, that's a level of baseline, not horribleness where, you shouldn't lose 60 games again.
Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, overall, it's a pretty easy, all right, they're butter just because they added 2 competent players. It's actually really weird. The Rockets, the Grizzlies, and the Spurs didn't really lose anyone on their teams. They just kept everybody essentially. And
the Spurs didn't have anyone that anybody else wanted.
Yeah. Well, Devontae Graham left. Yeah. But like, Devontae Graham had that big game winner that cost the Nuggets. Reason the Nuggets didn't finish with the 1 seed. Maybe the reason the Nuggets didn't make the finals was Devontae Graham, buzzer beater. I do like that they drafted Harrison Ingram, and you have Harrison Barnes and Ingram, both guys from North Carolina. I like that symmetry. I like that Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham look like they're much lower on the depth chart now. I like that part of it.
Yeah.
I think this team's going to be awful, actually. But I don't know. It's all about Wemby. I mean, Wemby has the highest 2K rating for any second-year player ever. And how much does that translate into wins in a Western Conference where there are, I think, at least 13 teams that have more talent? When I look at the roster, like, what does Chris Paul still have in the tank? I think Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson are they are who they are. Yeah. I'm not looking for big leaps from those guys.
Yeah.
And so they're competent NBA players. They're useful guys to have in the top 7, I think, of almost any NBA rotation. And if Wemby becomes MVP guy, okay, well then now, all right, they could be 500. But I can't. I mean,
this is my.
I can't envision this roster right now being over 500.
Unless Wemby is the guy that we think he's going to be eventually. They don't the best they can hope for is like fighting for the 10th seed.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about them. But that still is butter. So
yeah, that's butter.
We can give
Look,
them the
man,
butter.
I'm just saying right now, I watched too many Spurs games last year. I tried to watch every minute of Wemby last year.
How'd that go for you? It
was awful. When anyone else was doing something, it was terrible.
Yep.
This just adding Chris Paul who's nearly my age, right?
Yeah, age and height.
And slightly taller than me.
Yeah.
And man, it makes him so much better.
This is unrelated, Dave, but speaking of height, I was thinking about how the Grizzlies have 9 guys my height or shorter.
Yes.
Are they the shortest NBA team?
Well, Zach Edey kind of throws it off because isn't he like 7'5"?
They're so if we're counting two-way guys, most teams have 18 players if you use every roster spot. The Grizzlies have 17. They have an open roster spot. There's only 8 guys taller than me. Luke Kennard is the 9th tallest player, according to Basketball Reference, at 6'5". And I'm not 6'5", but I've been around both Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard. I'm not convinced they're a full inch taller than I am. But like Luke Kennard and Desmond Bane are the 9th and 10th tallest guys on the team. And then, of course, without Gigi Jackson, they get promoted. They're even taller now. So I obviously can't know every NBA roster to know how many guys roughly 6'4" and shorter they have, but having 9 feels like a lot.
That does feel like a lot.
Anyways, what were you saying about Chris Paul?
just listen, just having basketball players it's going to help the Spurs a lot.
Yeah.
Also, Wemby is going to be better. Wemby got better every single game last year.
That's true. He assimilated knowledge like the Borg. And it was terrifying. He just kept getting better and better and better.
I went and watched his first game.
Yeah.
I watched it like a month ago.
Yeah.
Just the Wemby clips.
Yeah.
He was amazing, but it's a totally different player now.
All right. So to recap the Southwest Division, like an absolute moron, I picked every team to be butter. Dave, you have the Pelicans and Grizzlies as slightly Parkay, I believe are your words. So you don't necessarily, until proven otherwise, believe in their improvements.
I care a little bit too much about basketball fit when I'm just looking on paper.
Yep.
And if that's the exercise, right? Like when I see it and it works, that's great. I'll change my mind. And with the Pelicans, I actually think there's a world that they could be 10 times better.
Yep.
But they have to do the things that, that work. And a lot of it depends on Zion.
That makes sense. Let's wrap up the show. With a special awards segment. This is, Dave, this date in International Stackhouse of Pancakes history. 4 years ago today, September 2nd, 2020, James Harden went 4 for 15 from the field, including 1 for 9 from 3 in a Game 7 victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. Harden's final stat line was 17 points, 9 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, 3 blocks, 4 turnovers, 5 fouls. What a game. Of course, Dave, there have only been 2 games ever played in NBA history on September the 2nd. They were both played in the bubble.
Yeah.
And the Rockets held on against the Thunder in Game 7. Chris Paul had a triple-double in that game for the Thunder, an exciting game. But this day in International Stackhouse of Pancakes history, brought to you by insert sponsor here. I want to get StatHead to sponsor this. I'm working on that.
That would be a good one.
Let's get
StatHead should be hiring you.
Let's get Basketball Reference / StatHead to sponsor this segment. Anyways, Dave, listeners, if you want to support this show, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you join up over there, you get access to a bonus episode I released last week with Sean Keane, talking about a wide array of subjects, including fantasy football punishments. We talked about some great NBA what ifs, some other fun stuff. Talked about Steph Curry's new contract. You get access to that if you're a Patreon supporter. Also, if you're a Patreon supporter, you get access to the Slack channel, and you can play fantasy basketball with me and other listeners when the time comes, as long as you're at the $5 a month tier. So support the show, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. And with that, you guys are the best. Thanks for listening. And remember, breakfast is the most important thing.
Yeah, never apologize for being G&G. Fair break, man. You understand? I will remember.